Gear Tasting Radio is brought to you by Imminent Threat Solutions. ITS provides knowledge that empowers individuals with indispensable skill sets to explore the world and prevail against all threats. Right now, as a special thank you for all podcast listeners, we're offering 10% off in the ITS store. Simply use the code GTR to save 10% at store.itstactical.com. Welcome to Gear Tasting Radio, where we offer an in-depth look into the usage and philosophy behind the equipment in our lives. I am Brian Black, joined as always by Rob Henderson.
Hello.
Today we are going to talk about not taking the easy way, and a little bit more on the philosophical side this week, basically talking about adversity a little bit, maybe taking those things that you do on a daily basis and purposely making them harder on yourself just to, I don't know.
Yeah, overcome adversity.
Yeah, I would say you're putting yourself in adverse conditions to overcome that and get a little taste of that. So
yeah. Well, so I think this is the ultimate first world problem, because I think back to like my great grandfather who was a farmer. Like, he didn't have to put adversity in his life. He had adversity,
No, that's a good
having
point.
to do physical manual labor, that kind of stuff. And so I think we've lost a lot of that because of electronics and like home delivery and things like that. So I always try to
we're looking at you, Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like taking the long road, or, doing things that give you an idea of how things can go if it goes wrong.
I think it's also included in this is doing things that may cost you more time to benefit you later on if something happens. I think that kind of falls in the same context because, yes, there's always like parking at the back of a parking lot to get the exercise from walking. However, there's also the time it takes you to back into a parking spot rather than pull forward so that your egress can be faster, or you've got your eyes open whenever you're pulling out of a parking spot. So I feel like those are they were kind of the same, but they're kind of different, but they're kind of in the same vein as well.
Yeah, I would consider that the same.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, when it comes to adversity, I feel like if you don't challenge yourself and you don't have that in your life, there's something you're missing. I feel that without those constant challenges in your life, that you really don't. I don't know. I don't feel like you develop as a person. You don't truly know yourself if you don't put yourself into those positions.
Yeah.
Did you agree with that?
Yeah, I think one of the examples I had thought of is like if you've ever met someone who's physically handicapped, and this is not across the board, but I find a lot of people to be super positive and like they have a good outlook. And I think it's because they do have to overcome that adversity. So like they have kind of a stake in the ground for like what bad could be. And so they try to overcome that and just be happier.
Well, it's also a level of humbling that most people don't feel on a regular basis, too.
Sure.
Like, I certainly take my life for granted. And, when you're putting yourself into certain situations that could be dangerous or anything like that, that's very much a part of this. But it also is, I also feel that there's not that, there's not that level of, oh my God, something bad could happen there that prevents you from doing that.
Sure.
So, I mean, take adrenaline junkies and people like that. Yeah. I mean, they're putting themselves in positions where if something happened, I mean, they're a vegetable. Yeah. So, it's, I don't know, there's a fine line between that too. So, this kind of goes across the whole spectrum of adversity and what kind of challenges we put in front of ourselves too on a daily basis. So, but, I truly feel that, growing and knowing yourself as a person and what you're capable of and how you're going to handle certain situations is very important. And I'm blessed to have gone through Hell Week, but not, made it as a SEAL. And I do feel lucky about that. There was a lot of time in my life where I hated that fact that, I'd made it so far. I got through Hell Week, I go through pool comp, and now I can't complete this, but it's actually one of the best things that's ever happened to me in my life, and I don't regret any of it now. There was a lot of regret early on, especially feeling sorry for myself after all that happened. But I'm also able now to see what that provided me by not making it through. I mean, I got guys or friends that are coming out of that I've got 10 years of business on them now.
Right.
You know, there's just so many benefits if I look at that, you know, and so many people, I hate to look at this as a benefit, because it's really not. It's just it's a realization that, you know, people I served with, you know, did go on to places like Ramadi, like Mark Lee and other people like that wound up, you know, giving their lives for the country over there. So I don't know. It just put a lot in perspective as I grew,
sure,
and as time went by. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of people will look at things like that as kind of like an unchecked box. But I think that you've been able to kind of, I mean, you can either look at it positively and move on from it, or you can just kind of wallow in it.
Yeah,
and it's always refreshing to see somebody that's just taken the positive, because I'm sure that like the experience you had even through the training pipeline is just great life experience.
Yeah, and I mean, to go back to adversity, I mean, that's really what it gave me too. Even though that was a horrible time, that whole week of Hell Week. If you know, if I were to culminate, I mean, the whole Bud sucked, but you know, Hell Week was especially horrible. But then afterwards, you're like, oh my God, I got through that. It just gives you such courage and I guess motivation to be able to tackle anything that comes up in life. So I don't feel that I would be as far in business or personal life now today if I hadn't been through that adversity and I didn't feel that I could tackle any problem that
kind of like
came my
sets
way.
the bar.
Yeah.
So that when you twist your ankle years from now, you're like, oh, okay, well, it could be worse.
Yeah. And there are things that still provide that. I mean, you don't have to go through a Hell Week to get that in your life. I'm just using that as an example. You know, I really like GoRuck's events, just like the general challenge events that they do, because it does give you a little bit of a taste of some of that, just in terms of putting yourself in physical adversity and working with a team and things like that. So I do feel like that might be one of the closest things around currently to that. If you're looking for that type of I don't know, event in your life.
Well, I think the team aspect is important on that, because I've found, especially for me, like if I'm by myself, I have the tendency to like probably not push as hard as I could.
Absolutely.
But as soon as I'm around people that are counting on me to like pull weight or something, it becomes like it's not about me, it's about helping the team. So those kind of events help, because it's like you'll push yourself farther, I think.
No, absolutely. The team dynamic is something that really can't be created other than having a team dynamic. It's not something that comes up in everyday life. And even it depends on the kind of work you're doing too, because yes, a job can create that type of feeling, but however, at the end of the day, you're still going home and you know, going back to not doing that. But unless you own your own business and you're working in your head 24/7. But anyway, that type of environment can foster some of that, but to really kind of mesh with people that are depending on you on that level is just a very interesting dynamic that it's hard to replicate, you know?
Well, and that's a great thing if you're looking for something to do involving adversity. That's a great thing to sign up for, is something like a GoRuck challenge, because then you can start to experience that and push yourself and make yourself uncomfortable, I think.
Well, and also just, I mean, not to keep using a Bud's reference, but to go back to that, 90% of that training is mental. And, you know, that's always been said, and it's kind of public that they say that, but you really don't think that when you're looking at the training pipe. And I'm like, oh my God, there's such a physical ability you have to have. You got to be able to run and swim and do an O course. And
it's like that last 10% has to do a lot of pull-ups.
Well, and so just to give you a perspective kind of from the outside, from someone that's been through the majority of that, 2/3 of Buds, the level of, I guess, the level of achievement you get from being able to do those exercises and preparing yourself physically for a challenge like that gives you that 10% mental edge that you need to get through that, because you've kind of put yourself through that mini adversity of the challenge of, can I hang, you know, can I do this many pull-ups? Can I do these challenges that I know I'm going to have to do, you know, when I go through that training? So that kind of gives you that mental fortitude.
So you know you can overcome the physical aspect.
And that's where I think the mental aspect of that comes into play, and as well as just other things in life too. I think that the more you can prepare, the more you can put yourself in situations that are like what you anticipate possibly going through. The more you're training your mind to to be comfortable in that position.
Sure.
Comfortable in the suck, so they say.
Yeah.
So, and that goes back to kind of doing things the hard way too, and that's kind of putting yourself in those positions so that when you do have an easy day, it really is an easy day.
Yeah, so it makes you appreciate the easy stuff more.
Absolutely.
Like taking the stairs instead of taking an elevator.
Yep.
You can. But I think there's also inherent benefits for that kind of stuff. Like you were talking about parking at the back of the parking lot and backing in. There are security benefits to that. So not only are you making it more steps you have to walk, but you're putting yourself in an advantageous position should something happen, and then able to get out. Same thing with taking the stairs. You don't have to be trapped in an elevator, all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, there is a lot to be said for that, and I do think that those little challenges that you can add into your life on a daily basis really do mean something. And you may dismiss that and say, I don't really care about that. I know I'm able to do it, which I get it. There's a certain level of what we're talking about in that kind of statement too, of like, I already know I can do that, so why even bother? But I do feel that, giving yourself those little life challenges to throw your way every once in a while helps out a lot. I know when we were talking about this topic, you mentioned, going to the gym and doing reps. If you forget the count, you just start all over again. And I do that too.
Like self-punishment.
More often than not, I just make myself repeat a couple of reps, not like the whole thing over, but that's just sadistic. But anyway, I do that because I don't feel like I'm cheating myself by not doing that or by missing a rep or something like that too. So that's somewhere that I do that as well. I'm trying to think of some other things that I kind of put myself into.
Well, so like when I go camping, anytime I'm going to start a fire, I make myself do it with a ferro rod.
There you go.
Because the rare times when I do start a fire with like a Bic lighter, it's like, oh man, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I don't have to sit there and de-wad a cotton ball and
that's a very good analogy for what we're talking about, and that's perfect.
And I'm not going so far as to like do the stick method, try to do the friction.
No one wants to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But like, it's a little bit of difficulty.
There's a fire plow. There's the
I can't remember what it's called. There's
bow drill.
Bow drill. That was what I was trying to think of. Yeah. And so I think that you're just setting yourself up for being more ready for that. So like when I'm camping, I try not to do everything the easiest way I can. If I'm going to do like a tent, I might try different knots as I'm tying the guy lines and things like that, just to keep the practice up. And it also just gives me the ability to kill time, which a lot of times when I'm camping is beneficial because I can only do so much reading and things. So,
well, it's good to have that opportunity too, and that's what I feel like is the biggest benefit of camping for me. It's not really sleeping under the stars and being outside as much as I love that stuff. It's really the quiet away from the monotony of everyday life that I like. That's that escape of getting out into the wilderness and doing something different too, and that actually goes back to kind of what we're talking about too. It's, making changes in your routine to give you that change.
Yep.
I think that's an important thing to do too. And, if we're talking about that, taking different ways home at the end of the day or different ways to work is a great thing too, because you can spot tails if you know what to look for. But
and it just gives you a better layout of your own neighborhood or your streets and things like that. I'll tell you something I've started doing recently that's weird. This is like from the financial side of things, is that I have started almost giving myself an allowance. And because I'm capping it at an amount, I find myself like, oh, I really need this thing. And then I'll go online and I'm about to buy it. And it's like, how much do I actually need this thing? And I'll think about it for a couple of days and then I'll find that it kind of dissipates.
Yeah.
And I end up not having a bunch of clutter and stuff. So
we started doing that too. It's actually, I think when we had that financial episode, someone mentioned that to me in a tweet that, his wife and his wife had given themselves allowances. And I just got to thinking about that more. And Kelly and I had tried that years ago and it just never really panned out. But we kind of set up an automatic draft every paycheck that just goes in there and we don't even have to think about it. So it's almost like until I manually stop it, it's just going to happen.
Yep.
So it's been happening and I really like it.
Yeah.
It's actually allowed us to really track our finances better because all that fluff, so to speak,
it's all
of
the
like
little onesie twosie
stuff.
of
like personal purchases don't have to be in that account. I mean, you truly see like what's you see the grocery bills and the electrical bill, and you see everything kind of in one place rather than, getting lost in the sauce, so to speak. Yep. So it makes the balancing of accounts a lot easier too.
Sure.
So
well, and when you lower the amount that you're looking at as a whole, you can say, oh, this thing is going to be, like 50% of my allowance versus like, 10% of the overall or whatever. And so I find that it puts a lot of things in perspective for just things that I really don't want, but I think I want. Yeah. And it just helps make it more well-rounded for the things I do purchase. And sometimes I'll save up back-to-back allowances to get something more expensive. And those, it's almost more rewarding because it's like, man, I really worked for this a little bit, and
I agree with
talk
that.
about that adversity of like putting an obstacle in your way and not just making it easy makes you appreciate the thing. I think that's why kids appreciate stuff that they buy even more, especially if like you mowed lawns to get something and like you buy that thing and that becomes like, oh man, this is the thing.
Yeah. It's, some kids are different too. I mean, my stepson growing up, he never really wanted to do things to earn money to save. But it was strange because he didn't really have a want list. I mean, he wanted things and he was always very appreciative of gifts and things like that around the holidays and his birthday and stuff, but he just never had that drive to save money. So that was just a strange thing that we went through.
Well, and to me, like you said, if he doesn't have this big list of wants, it's okay to want to.
Which I respect the hell out of. I mean, that's very interesting for a kid not to have that because I sure didn't have that.
Well,
I mean, I was
to this day I have like 6 lists of things I want.
I was saying my prayers at night, wishing I'd wake up with all the G.I. Joes under my
Kung
bed.
Fu grip.
Yeah. But yeah, strangely enough, I mean, it's still kind of like that. But just not with G.I. Joes. Maybe a Pappy Van Winkle collection under my bed when I wake up.
Not with Kung Fu grip.
No, but it has given me a new appreciation for that of having to save and use those funds that are in that account, and it is putting that blockade in front of your spending habits and just kind of that, I don't know, the hard way, just like what we're talking about. It's it's not that easy, click to purchase anymore. You really got to think about what you have in there. So
well, I have an old Vice that my grandfather had, and it's really old and it's got some rust on it, and it's just not as smoothly operating. So I thought about, well, I'll go get a new one, but I saw an Instagram post of somebody that had refinished one the other day, and I thought that's what I should do. I should take it on myself to strip it, repaint it, that kind of stuff. And it's a harder way, but I also think it'll be cool because it'll kind of revive something that I already have, and it'll probably be cheaper.
Yep.
But it's really tempting to go on Amazon and just like buy it because they're cheap.
Well, that's what I do with that arcade build that I'm doing. I found an old machine for $250 that was crappy and had a crack in it and needed repair. And, I've been slowly putting that together and building my own little MAME Raspberry Pi type game cabinet. But the good thing was the monitor was still good. So the amount of money that I put into it, I could have probably bought, another one that worked just fine that I could have used that for. But I really enjoyed the challenge and kind of doing it the hard way. And it has made the project more rewarding, and I really am more, I don't know, I'm just more proud of the end result, which I'm not quite finished yet. But
well, and the experience that you get.
Yeah, and I get to learn along the way too. And that's part of I think the overall philosophy we're talking about is not only does the hard way kind of introduce the adversity, but you learn along the way, not only about yourself, but you learn those skills or tasks that you might not otherwise.
Yeah, it's like it's not about the destination; it's about the way you get there.
Yeah,
like the stuff that you learn. Because I'm sure that you've learned stuff of like, oh, don't do that.
Well, I'll tell you what's crazy is that I've never used a router before. I've always known what that tool was, but I took the little stripping that's around an arcade cabinet for granted. It's like a little channel that runs around the entire length of the cabinet, and you can change out colors or whatever. But it's like a 3/4 inch wide strip, and it's like a T-molding. So it's, if you can imagine the back, it's got like a stem on it, and then a flat surface, and the flat surface is what you see. But then that stem goes into that channel, and that channel is cut by a router. So I had to figure out, okay, what's a router? How do I do this? What kind of blade do I need? How am I going to go about this? Like, I had to cut a whole new top for the control panel, and it had a piece that ran around it. So I'm like, oh, great, I got to figure out this router thing. I mean, I wound up buying a $200 router to do it, but
now you got a router.
Buy cheap, buy twice. But it was kind of the best one on Amazon. I thought, this is a really cool tool. I see so many things that I can do with this project-wise that I'm just going to invest in a really good one and teach myself how to do it. But I mean, that's one of those things I probably would have never picked up if I still have $200 in my pocket, but still, it's I probably would have never thought to take on that skill to learn if I wouldn't have had this project. So.
Well, that's the best way to learn is to just jump into it. I mean, on certain things it's nice to get training and stuff, but to figure it out yourself, I find that I retain a lot more of that information if I have to solve a problem in order to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think just the overall premise behind this is just putting yourself in those adverse conditions, making it harder, kind of instilling that drive to learn in yourself and kind of coming out better in the end. Because I feel like that's it's just a trait that I think everybody should pay attention to, and not enough people pay attention to that nowadays.
Yeah.
I feel like like you said, we live in that one-click economy that it's just so easy to do everything, and we're used to pushing one button and everything comes on the TV and all that. It's just, I mean, it's a
go out and make your own Netflix shows.
Right. Follow some roads.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
Thanks for listening to Gear Tasting Radio. Remember, if you have questions, use the # Gear Tasting on any social media network, and we will find them and get them answered for you. We are actually going to do a question episode next time, so if you have questions that have been on your mind for a while, definitely shoot them to us any way you can. Email,
post them,
snail mail,
find them.
Western Union, it doesn't matter. We'll get them. And be sure to check out Apple Podcasts. If you're watching or listening to the podcast through Apple Podcasts, we very much appreciate your subscription, as well as your review. We've had some hilarious reviews come in, and we like reading those as well. But we hope you're going to leave us a 5-star review. It definitely helps in terms of how Apple showcases our podcast to other people, so we very much appreciate that too. Last but not least, check out our Crew Leader membership, linked in the episode intel. We will have some articles as well, because we've talked about adversity many times on ITS, so we have some good mindset articles to link to. But the membership in itself allows us to give something back to you for your support. So we very much appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.